Well, we have a pretty decent app here, but there's one thing it doesn't do, and that is save its state. So let's say I'm right here on the topics at the facts entry, and a phone call comes in, and I navigate away and handle that, and then later I come back to this app expecting it'll be where I was. So let me show you first of all the recipe for saving state in an app. You're going to hit the home button, and then you're going to go hit stop in Xcode. And now the app has had a chance to save its state, and it has been unloaded. And so when I launch it again, it's gonna be like going to that phone call and then running a bunch of other apps, and later on returning to our Quotes app. And when I return to my Quotes app by hitting the play button here, what happens to me? Okay, that's where it should be, but no. When it comes live, it loads the original quote of the day. It goes to its default entry point. I'm not saving state. To save state, I need to, so there are two places where I can read about this, well, at least two places. One is in the View Controller Programming Guide for iOS, and it'll talk about the various things that you need to do and talk about restoration identifiers and things like that. And then there's also the App Programming Guide for iOS, and this is the one that's maybe a little bit more detailed. You come down to preserving your app's visual appearance across launches, and it goes into a fairly detailed discussion of how this mechanism works. I'm going to come down here to the checklist, and I'll explain some things along the way, but you really need to read this documentation to understand the full topic. Okay, checklist. First of all, we need to go to our app delegate, and we need to implement two protocol methods. Okay, so back to the app delegate. Okay, so we want application should restore and should save. So I start typing and my auto-completion will come up, and I might have to dig through and find these, but there's my should restore, and I'm just going to return true. Now there are some cases that the documentation talks about where you may want to return something other than true, like if you release an update that's not backwards compatible with the previous state. It doesn't make sense to restore the state of the old version of the app, and so maybe the first time you'd say false and then otherwise return true. But anyway, usually you can just return true. Okay, and then should save application state, we're going to always say that yes, please do save my state. I want you to save my state. All right, and now the next step says assign restoration identifiers to each view controller. And then if you want to save state of specific views, assign non-empty strings to their restoration identifier properties. And in this topic here, preserving the state of your views, it'll talk about how really it's table view and collection view controls that are the ones that where you need to do that. So we're going to go back to our storyboard, and now we just need to assign restoration identifiers for our 6 view controllers here. And we do have 2 table views, so I'll assign restoration identifiers there as well. So we do this by going to the identity inspector, and I'm going to type in a storyboard ID. I'm going to say main nav VC, and I'm going to check this box. My restoration identifier is going to be the same as my storyboard identifier. And we'll do that for all of these. Give unique names for view controller. This is going to be the settings nav VC. And this one is going to be the settings VC. And while I'm here, let's go to the document outline and let's go to the table view there on my settings scene, and let's just call this the settings table view. All right, now down to this navigation controller, and that's going to be my topics nav VC, and this one is going to be my topics VC. Again, on its table view, we will set a restoration ID of topics table view. Okay, now let's see if it starts to save state with this much work. Now we're not done with our checklist, so while it's building and launching, I'll come back to the checklist. The next one says, show your app's window from the application will finish launching with options method. The state restoration machinery needs the window so that it can restore scroll positions and other relevant bits of your app's interface. All right, now what exactly that means is a little hard to dig out if you've never done this before, so I'll show you what it means. First of all, is it going to launch? Okay, it says it's launched. Okay, so now I go to my topics view controller and I scroll down to facts, and the recipe is hit the home button and then hit stop, so it's had a chance to save its state and it gets unloaded. Now let's reload by running it again. Up it comes, and hey, it brought me to the fax point here. That's because I put this restoration identifier on the table view. So UIKit, which is doing most of the work here, says, okay, I'm going to do my best to save this position. Sometimes you have to do a little more work on your dynamic lists to get it to be able to save that state. There's a protocol that you may need to implement called UI Data Source Model Association that you can read about in the documentation there. But okay, so I started down this next item, show your apps window. Let me show you what they intend by that. In the app delegate, we need to implement this application. So we have a did finish launching with options. At this point, state restoration has finished. But we have another lifecycle method, application will finish launching. And we return true from this one all the time to say, yeah, go ahead with your normal launch sequence. But the other thing that I want to be able to do here is I want to say, okay, window, notice it's optional, so I'm going to use optional chaining here. Window dot make key and visible. This is saying make this window that's assigned to this property up here, this window property, make that one the key window for this device and make it visible. Now it doesn't become visible until it goes through the whole state restoration process, and it did finish launching, so it's not going to be visible until sometime up in here or shortly thereafter. But this is what they're asking us to do, even though they don't explain it very well here on step number 3. Okay, number 4, assign restoration classes to the appropriate view controllers. Well, that is if you're not using storyboards. If you're programming your views and creating all your view controllers programmatically, you're going to use restoration classes instead of these restoration identifiers. Now, the next step, encode and decode the state of your views and view controllers using encode and decode restorable state with coder. Okay, what it's asking for here, let me show you what actually it's doing here. So let's go to happiness, and let's go to topic 2 of 2. So I'm on happiness 2 of 2. Actually, you know what? I think that's today's quote of the day. Yeah, human happiness and moral duty are inseparably connected. So let's go to confession, say. All right, so here I'm on confession 1 of 1. And now I hit the home button. I'm going to do Command-Shift-H, the keyboard shortcut. I go stop it so it unloads the app, and now I relaunch. And you'll see the bitmap come up here that says this is where I think it should be going back to. So it should be going back to confession. When it actually launches, it goes to today's quote of the day. So there's some state that we're not saving in the quote view controller. So basically they're saying, look, go through all of your view controllers and see, is there some state that you need to encode and decode on the way out or the way back in? So let's look at our model for each of the view controllers. Here I have a property called selected topic. Should I save that? Should I encode that and then decode it on the way back in? Well, okay, let's look at how it's used. I only set it when they select a row, when the user selects a row in the topics table view, and then I just immediately use that. Yeah, basically this is just a pass-through. This is a temporary thing, and it doesn't need to persist across launches of this view. It's only used very briefly. So I don't need to save that one. And that's the only model for this that we care about for this one. All right, now next. Settings view controller. All right, look at its model. So we've got these 5 properties, but guess what? They're saved into user defaults, and we restore them every time we launch. So there's nothing really to save here either on settings. Okay, rotating navigation controller. Yeah, this is just to handle the auto rotation stuff. No state that we've got to deal with here. UIKit handles everything associated with the nav view controller. So it looks like quote view controller is the only one with model that we need to worry about. These 3 properties here. Now let's analyze them carefully. So current quote index is which quote out of this quotes array we're currently displaying. And then topic says what topic are we looking at. Now if you remember, think back through our implementation before, this quotes array is computed. It depends on whether we have a topic or not. So if we don't have a topic, we get the full quote deck in quote of the day order. If we do have a topic, we get the topics associated with that tag. But in either case, we have this current quote index that we need to remember. Okay, so there is something for us to save here. So let's go after our view controller lifecycle section. Let's add a new section that we're going to call state restoration. And in here we're going to have our decode and encode. So decode restorable state with coder and encode restorable state with coder. All right, now in these methods we're always going to call our super and pass in that coder that we got. And then we can do our own encode decode business. All right, so over here as well, super.decode restorable state with that coder. All right, so more to come in a minute here, but we have a key value store. This coder will let us read values associated with keys, and so I need to define some keys, which I'm going to want to do in a struct. I could do an enum of type string, but I'm going to do a struct here. And anyway, if you remember day 5, I think it was, I showed you enumerations, and that's another way if you want to use raw value. Okay, static let, and the first property is going to be current quote index. And I'm just going to give it the same name. Static let topic equal topic. Okay, so now I have symbolic constants I can use when I encode and decode my keys. All right, so on the encode side, this is pretty straightforward. I just go to my coder and I say coder.encode, and you see I have all kinds of choices here. I can say value, double, or int, or bool, or one of these ought to encode an object. Yeah, here we go. It takes an any, optional any, for key string. Anyway, so I'm just going to start typing encode, and the first thing I'm going to encode is the current quote index, and then the for key is going to be key.current quote index. Coder.encode. Now I have that optional string topic, and remember it takes an any optional here, so it's okay for me to pass in a string that's optional, and it's going to be key.topic. All right, now on the decode side, very similar. I'm just going to say current quote index equal coder.decode. And now on the decode side, you see that there are these different decode names that I have to call to get the kind of the particular return type that I'm interested in. That's just the way Swift is on its polymorphism. Okay, so decode integer. Now as I start typing int, you see there are some other integer types, int32 and int64. I want the straight up integer, int. So I'm going to decode integer for string. That was called current quote index. And now I just want topic equals coder.decode string for key.topic. Okay. Uh-oh. No member decode string. Huh. Okay, so what can I decode? If I do a control space here, I can decode object. It returns an optional any. Well, that might work. Let's try decode object instead of string. Decode object for key topic. Compile. Can't assign an optional any to an optional string. So I need to cast that. Okay, the right way to do this is an if-let with a conditional cast. If-let save topic equals coder decode object as question mark string. So if I could decode a key topic object, it's non-nil, and I can convert it to a string, let's assign it across. Oops. Topic equals save topic. Okay, otherwise we don't have one, and we're just going to leave topic at nil, which is what it is initialized to by default when we first load up this view controller. Okay, now there's one more piece, and that is I need to recalculate this quotes array after having retrieved the index and the saved topic. So now notice I've already called configure up here in my view did load, and configure says, hey, let's go build that quotes object out of our quote deck, either using a given topic or give me the whole list of quotes, one of the two. So I want something similar, but not quite the same. I want to say, look, if I've already set the current quote index here, I don't want to do that in configure again. So if I just call configure, it's going to override my quote index and set it to 0. Okay, not desired. That's not what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a parameter to configure that says, am I updating the current index or not? So here I'm going to say updating current index true. And let's go down to configure, and the parameter is updating current index. That's the external name. The internal name, we're going to call it needs update. That's going to be a Boolean. And if it needs update, then we're going to say quote index is 0 here. And that's also part of this choose quote of the day. If needs update, then yeah, go select the quote of the day. Otherwise, bypass that quote of the day that's, see up here, it's setting the current quote index. And so we're not going to do that if we don't need to update current quote index. All right, so up here then we need to say updating current index true. And where else do we have that error? Down here. Updating current index true. And then in our decode, at this point I can say, all right, now configure, configure, and then this time not updating the current index. Let's run this and see what happens to us. Okay, initializing, loading. Okay, so we're at quote of the day. All right, let's go to topics. Let's get confession. Okay, now go to home, Command Shift H, and then hit stop, and then relaunch. So launching. There's my bitmap. And then you see it saw the flash there, it reloaded, and it's reloaded in the same state as I was in before. Okay, let's verify that we get back to settings appropriately. So here we are on settings, and I'm just changing it to 6:45 p.m. Command Shift H, stop, relaunch. Now the other thing here too is it should have saved the state, so yep, there we are on the same spot that we've been at before. And if I say done, I should see my confession. Yep, there it is, 1 of 1. All right, so I think we've finished the state restoration. In a more complicated app, you might need to learn some other things like UI data source model association. And if you have custom views, you may have to do some work on helping them to properly save their state. There are a couple more bullet points here about top level information associated with the app. We don't really have, our quote deck is static, and so there's really not much else for us to do. And this last bullet point is talking about the UI data source model association protocol. I can show you quickly, let me just show you very quickly how we might do that if we had to. So if I go to Topics View Controller, I'd say I implement the UI data source model association protocol, which has 2 methods in it. And let's see here. So I would put that right after my view controller lifecycle. So I'm again going to call this, sorry, not state restoration, but data source model association. And there are basically 2 methods. It needs to know how to turn an identifier into an index path and how to turn an index path into a string identifier. And so I'm going to say index path for element with model identifier and view here. Okay, and it wants me to return an index path. Well, what I do here is I say, all right, let me go to my quote deck, and I'm going to go to my shared instance, and I'm going to ask for the tag set, and I'm going to ask for, now remember, this is the topics view controller. The tag set defines the list of topics. And so now I'm asking my array, my string array of tags, would you please give me the index of the identifier that has been passed in? So basically the value of the tag is the identifier that we're going to use here. And Now, what is row? Row is this optional array index. So I'm going to use an operator that you haven't seen before, perhaps. This is the nil coalescing operator. If the thing on the left is nil, then it's going to use the thing on the right. If the thing on the left is non-nil, it's just going to return that thing on the left. So if the thing on the left is nil, instead of returning nil, return 0. So I'm going to get an integer no matter what. And now I can build an index path. And I can say, well, the row and the section. So the row is going to be that one that I just constructed. And the section, I only have one section, so it's the first one, 0, in this particular table view. And so you see, if that were nil, I might have a problem here. I wouldn't be able to, here, let's just take that off for a second. And now it's going to compile, it's going to say, wait a second, I don't like this right here. Value of optional, not unwrap. Did you mean to unwrap it? But that could be unsafe if it really is nil. Anyway, so, oops, paste it. So the nil coalescing operator can be really handy sometimes. And then the other side of this to say, give me the model identifier for an element at a given index path. Model identifier for element at index path. So here, we're just going to return quote deck dot shared instance dot tag set. And then which one? We want the one, so IDX is an index path, and we want the row out of that index path. And compile now. And so what that's doing is it's saying, all right, look, if I care to implement this data source model association, I give you an index path, you tell me an identifier string for it that matches your model, and it persists across runs. And so even if you delete some elements while we're gone, like let's say this is a contacts app and you delete a contact, it could still scroll to a contact if you've properly identified it through a string, but you know how to turn that string into an entry in the model, into an index path here. So this is a pretty simple one. They can get much more exotic, but that's the other piece that you may need to do. Let me just prove to you that we didn't break it. So we're going to launch again. And now we go to topics, scroll to the bottom. So goals at the top and wishes is at the bottom. Home, stop, launch. There's our bitmap. And yeah, it's live now. It did restore it to that state. Okay, so nothing's broken. All right, I think that's the end of our Founding Fathers Quotebook video series. We may be able to come up with some additional things to do with this, but I can't think of any right now. So I hope you found this instructional and useful to see how to do a more or less complete and fairly professional app.